Hey guys, just out for a recovery run as part of my taper to the Boston Marathon. So I'm now within 2 weeks of the big race. Super excited and just thought I would take this opportunity to give you a recap of what my trainings look like, how it's been going, and looking ahead to the race as well. So that intro video shows a little glimpse into what training for a spring marathon looks like in Colorado. We've really experienced all types of weather. I think we probably just forget every single winter what it was like the year before. It's probably not that much different. But anyway, if you guys only follow me on YouTube and not on Instagram, you might be saying to yourself right now, oh, I didn't even know that she was training for the Boston Marathon because I really haven't put out any content specifically about me training for anything right now on YouTube. I do put it more in Instagram stories. If you guys want to follow me there, I'll put my handle below. So with that, I started this marathon training cycle pretty much fresh off of the Houston Marathon. So I did do a recap of that marathon, which I will link up here. But it was January 15th and the Boston Marathon is April 17th. So they are essentially 3 months apart. And that is not even a full block of marathon training typically. Obviously, I'm coming in with a lot more fitness built and cumulative training coming into this. So it works, but there's that whole other layer of, not getting any downtime, any real downtime in between. And so when I say that, I don't mean that I didn't recover from the Houston Marathon. I absolutely did. I took a full week off of running, and even the next 2 weeks were fairly light, but by the 4th week, it was straight back into it. So even though I did have a very physical break in terms of not running for a week, I already knew I was going straight into the other marathon training block. So I feel like I didn't really get that mental break that is often so necessary between training cycles. And yeah, it definitely threw me for a loop. It was something that I wasn't expecting. And I think a lot of that comes back to the excitement that I had around the Boston Marathon last year, with it being my first one. There was absolutely nothing that would have gotten in the way of me, doing it that time around. And so it was a very weird feeling this year to even be questioning if I wanted to do it. And so I think there was a lot of push and pull of emotions of like, I know now from going through the experience of, training so hard to qualify for Boston and then getting in and not getting to do it because of COVID, and then not having a good enough time the next year, and then finally getting in and finally getting to run it. Going through that whole process was just such a huge part of my life. And to now have the opportunity to run it again and consider not wanting to was a very strange feeling. And I know from coaching runners how hard they work to try to get this and how important it is to them. So kind of felt like this opportunity that I should just feel lucky to have, which, everyone who qualifies for the Boston Marathon doesn't run the Boston Marathon, so it's totally okay. I just think that, we have these expectations, or society sets these expectations, right? Of like, oh, well, you should be absolutely thrilled to get to do this because, someone else might say, well, I would be so lucky if I was in your position. But then I think we have to remember, like, at the end of the day, we need to do what is most important for ourselves and not do what everybody else thinks we should be doing, right? And so I went through a lot of that. And ultimately, I think it just came down to having a little bit of a feeling of burnout. Like I wanted a little bit more break. But after the fact, looking back, it was kind of this weird thing of, yes, I was getting back into the training, and in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm not ready to go back to these 60-mile weeks. It's so much training. Why am I doing this to myself? I'm not ready. But then also wanting to do so well in my next marathon and feeling like I was just starting back at square one, when is really funny to think about when I had just run a marathon PR just a few weeks prior. And yeah, I think it just came down to a lot of pressure on myself, not really feeling great because I was still recovering from the marathon. I mean, it takes a huge toll on your body, running a marathon at your max race effort for that distance. And I just don't think you really feel, back to your normal self for like 4 to 5 weeks post marathon. And so I think I was going through a little bit of that too. The run's not feeling great when I thought that they should feel better. Felt like I should be super fit. When in actuality, I was still recovering, and yeah, it's kind of starting back at a new training cycle. And you always have to remind yourself, like, it's the beginning of the marathon training cycle. You're not supposed to be ready for a marathon. And it's the same thing with starting a new one for Boston. So I truly, am not making this up at all, but went through a lot of tears and talking to my husband about, is this really what we want to be spending our money on? It's very expensive to go to Boston. And I also think it was this realization that the experience this time around is not going to be like it was the first time. The first time running Boston is this huge thing. My kids were there, my parents were there. Just a big to-do, right? And so this year it's just my husband and myself. But I do have 2 friends who I coached to their Boston qualifying times, who I'm still coaching now and are running it. And so it will still be an amazing experience with being with them. My coach is running it, or if her athletes are running it. And so it will be a very cool experience. It will just be different. So just a little bit of a glimpse into what training has looked like coming back off of Houston. I was continuing on working with my coach and essentially having the biggest mileage training block I've had, with quality and quantity. So it actually looks really similar in quantity of mileage per week as last year when I was training myself last year. The difference being that because I was really building my mileage up in that cycle beyond what I'd ever done before, I knew that the quantity had to be the focus, and making sure that I was being careful about not doing too much speed, just because when you're coupling that speed with building mileage, you're in a riskier zone. So it was nice this year to be coming back to that mileage again, coming off and building from what I did in Houston to now, and actually seeing faster speeds than I've really ever seen in any other training block. And so that was a really cool thing about this training cycle, is highest mileage ever, fastest speed sessions, hitting mile pace records in the middle of workouts, and the slowest miles I've ever run as well. Ultimately, the training has been really, really good. It's also been a lot. I've worked incredibly hard, and just managing all of that, it is difficult, and you do have to really have your why established and know, the purpose of doing this. And I really needed to keep my eye on the Boston Marathon and why that was important to me. And yeah, I don't know, I turned it around somewhere. Obviously I ended up signing up. We are going, and I'm honestly in a really great space. I have been the last 6 weeks. I think just seeing the training turn around, noticing my fitness getting better. There were definitely workouts where I was seeing that, made me excited for more. So that's where I'm at. So I thought that I could answer some questions that I've gotten on YouTube from athletes. After I post things on Instagram, I've had some of these questions. So in one particular post I put up, it was a short, actually it was on YouTube as well, but I showed that I was running 60 plus mile weeks and what my training looked like to get there. I was able to get there much more quickly than I would have in a different training block, or anyone else would be starting at a much lower mileage, simply because I was coming off high peak weeks in Houston as well. But after that, someone wrote to me and they asked, why is running 60 plus mile weeks necessary? So I just want to tell you guys that really for distance running, especially when we're talking half marathon, your number one predictor of success is volume. So the mileage, kilometers that you're running, essentially that time on feet. So how much time are you spending running in the week? That's your number one predictor of how well your marathon's going to go. And so for someone like me who's been training for years and years and years, we have to keep adjusting the stimulus. I can't keep doing the same things and expecting different results. And so that gets harder and harder as time goes on to find something and tweak it to make it better than what I've done in the past so that I can keep making these gains in my running, which was a huge reason for hiring a running coach. I did, a lot of this on my own for a very, very long time, making the gains for a long time. But then having a year of stunted growth was like, I need an outsider looking in to push me. And I feel like for the first time, it started in Houston for sure, but really this training block for the first time, I think I'm really noticing the difference. And so with that comes higher mileage weeks and hitting 60s plus for multiple weeks. And if I was ready for 70 plus weeks, then my coach would probably put me there. So I'm not there yet. But she did start having me do 2-a-days, 1 day a week. So running twice in 1 day. So a speed session in the morning and a recovery run in the afternoon. I did that 3 times. So 3 separate weeks in this training cycle. And ultimately it comes down to, if I can spend more time running, more time on feet, higher volume, then there's more likelihood that I will have a better outcome in the marathon. So that's why. So along those same lines, how are you able to run 6 days a week, logging 60 plus mile a week? So I think this is something that at least someone who's maybe on the lower end of the mileage spectrum, or they've capped out at 50 and can't imagine doing any more, or they are always getting injured at a lower mileage, they really can't fathom how I could be, running 60 plus miles per week. The truth is that, probably 95% of runners are not running 60 plus miles per week in their training. So it definitely is a lot compared to the average runner. And really the answer to this question is, how do I do it? Is I run a lot of easy miles. And like I said before, I'm running the highest mileage I've ever run, the highest quality I've ever run. I'm also running the slowest easy miles I've ever run. So I always see this quote, or people say this: you don't win a medal for your easy pace. And so I think you have to keep reminding yourself of that the goal is to get the PR, cross the finish line, the medal, do your best on race day, not on your easy days. And so it's easy for me to make sure that I'm going slow enough on those days because I want to make it count on the days that matter. I want to be able to hit my paces on the speed session. So this is true in like a long run workout. When I have a warm up and it's supposed to be easy pace, I am going really easy in that warm up because I want to hit the pace in the pace portion, that marathon pace or half marathon pace or whatever it is, in the long run. That's the part that matters. So yes, you want all the mileage, but then you got to be able to hit those paces. So if you're going too hard in your warm up and can't hit the paces, then you miss the purpose of the workout. So ultimately, that's the biggest way I'm able to log this much time on feet, is having lots and lots of easy miles. The other part of that is being consistent with strength training. And I do not do a lot, you guys. I'm just really consistent with doing it a couple times, 2-3 times a week. And that keeps my body strong in the process as well. So with that, how do I fit it all in? I will be the first to say that I'm lucky in that I have a flexible schedule. I mean, I've carved out my life this way, but I'm definitely privileged in that area where there are runners who I work with that have very limited time to get their runs in based on what their work schedule is. And even, for those people, it's more about making sure that you're very diligent in your routines. But I definitely have those days as well where I have meetings all day long or calls, other things that I'm getting done where I know this is the only amount of time where my run is getting done. And so that's when I schedule it. So I'm very good about knowing what my schedule is going to be coming up, how much time I need to allot for that particular run so that it gets done. I'm never in a situation where it's like 8 o'clock at night and I have to get a run in. But if I was in that situation, I would jump on the treadmill and do it. So I don't miss runs unless I'm sick. And very extenuating circumstance, knock on wood, I have not missed a day this entire training cycle, which makes me super happy. But yeah, ultimately it just comes down to, I know what my schedule is and I make sure that it is part of my calendar. Like I set a time aside for it so that it gets done. And it has to be thought of as a no excuses part of your day. That's how I fit it in. It takes careful planning, but if it matters to you, you'll find a way. I truly, truly believe that. Next question, I actually got from an athlete of mine, and she asked me if I ever dread running. And I want to be really honest about this question. So I was thinking it through. I don't think I ever feel a feeling of dread. I'm so ingrained in this routine of running every day that I don't really give myself time to think it through, or if I don't want to do it. I'm just so disciplined that it is getting done. That doesn't mean that I don't ever have these kind of feelings of like, oh, I just wish I could stay in bed for an hour longer. You know, I definitely have those feelings. I don't think it's ever dread though. And then like the night before a long run, I definitely have those feelings of overwhelm that you guys probably have as well. And I overcome that by just making sure that I'm getting everything ready for the run, and that just calms me down, because then I know that I'm ready for it and prepared, which is super important. And I would just kind of liken it to me doing these YouTube videos. I have been doing these for a while now, and I still get nerves before, but once I get started, everything's good. So like I definitely have nerves before speed sessions and long runs, especially the ones that have pace work in them. But once I get going, it's just kind of this, okay, like I know this is gonna get done. I'm gonna give it my best, and you know, that's all that matters. So but I do think it's definitely really normal to have those feelings of not wanting to do it. I definitely have those. And there are gonna be days you lack motivation. And that's why, you know, you have to keep your eye on the goal and keep considering why it's so important to you, because you have to be disciplined enough to get it in no matter what, knowing that it's going to be worth it. And I'll tell you what, guys, every time I cross a marathon finish line, that's like my first feeling. It was all worth it. It was incredibly hard, but every part of it was worth it. So next one is, how does Boston Marathon training look different than another marathon training cycle? So the Boston Marathon is a different course in that it's pretty hilly. It also starts more downhill, and then you get uphill, and then you get downhill again. And so you definitely have to really train your body to use those muscles that you're going to be needing to use going in the uphill as well as the downhill. Both are very important. And so for me personally, coming off of Houston Marathon training, Houston is a very flat course, to Boston Marathon training for a hilly course, they are looking different, and definitely having a coach, she adjusted the training accordingly. And for me, coaching those athletes who are running Boston or have someone running Big Sur, which is super hilly compared to Boston, even more so. Just making sure that I'm giving the right training and doing the right training for myself to be ready. And so that's just going to be a lot more hill repeats, hill strides, hill sprints, easy runs on hills, marathon pace on hills, long runs on hills. You know, the more that you can put your body in that same scenario that's going to be on race day, the more prepared you're going to be. And, you know, the less possibility of that fatigue coming in, or that muscle breakdown in the muscles that you're not used to using late in the race. So that's super important. So I would say that that is the biggest difference. And just that pace wise, I've improved. And so some of my speed sessions have had faster paces. Does that mean that I'm going to be running this race faster than Houston? I don't know. And so I'll end with that. One question I've gotten is, what is my goal for this race? And obviously I have this question in my own head. And very, very honestly, I have not attached a time goal specifically to this race. My main goal for this race is to be brave. And you know, part of being brave is doing what I need to do to, yeah, have the best time that I can get for where I am on the day and what the conditions are and all of those things. But I don't want to feel like I'm limiting myself by putting a time on it. But I want to show up in a brave way, because I feel like for me, I've gotten very, very good at pacing marathons. I very much know how to start conservatively, be smooth in the middle, and finish really, really strong. And not to say that I haven't been brave in the past. Definitely at the end of Houston, I was. I also, go through my head, could I have started that faster pace sooner? I was running like 7:40 to 7:50 at the end. Could I have done more of that sooner? And I would have gotten that 3:30, so I think just pushing myself a little bit beyond that comfortable space that I like to stay in for a longer period of time in the marathon. And this doesn't mean, going out too fast. This doesn't mean going out faster than marathon pace, or being stupid. It just means maybe pushing it a little bit beyond what I would normally do for the very conservative start for me. And yeah, just being super, super brave at the end and seeing what happens, and just give it my all on race day. That's honestly really what matters to me. And I'm excited just about this training block in general and how it's gone, and the confidence I've built, and how that's going to take me into my Chicago Marathon training block as well. Thanks for joining me, guys. If you have questions, drop them below, and I will definitely be checking in, hopefully from Boston. If not from Boston, with even something short, then definitely I will recap the race and let you know how it goes.